I'm watching this UMIAC third Wednesday service. You want to watch it?
Is that you, Dick Burkhart?
Yes.
Yeah, would you please mute yourself? Welcome, everyone, to the third Wednesday worship service sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council. I'm Richard Trudeau. I'm a semi-retired UU minister living in Massachusetts. I'm a member of that organization. Its long name we shortened to UUMAC, and we even shorten that to UMIAC. We ought to pronounce it UMUAC, but we pronounce it UMIAC, or even more briefly, the MAC. Our preacher this evening is the Reverend Kate Braestrup, a law enforcement chaplain from Maine, longtime UU minister. Her sermon is called, as you probably just saw on the slide, Healing Like Jesus. I have an announcement I'd like to make, a very brief one, namely the date of the next service and the preacher, the Reverend Ken Pfeiffer. If you got a Zoom link from me and you'd like to get a Zoom link for the next service, I will automatically send you one. But if someone forwarded it to you, or if you know someone who might like to join us, they need to send an email to that email address there, Richard, the numeral 3, the word point, @gmail.com. That will produce a link in a couple of weeks. I have a chalice here that I will endeavor to light. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys, needs and gifts. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and in celebration of the life we share together. It is the mission of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Unity Action Council, UMIAC, to carry out and foster anti-racist and multiracial unity activities, both within and outside the Unitarian Universalist Association, through education, bearing witness and other actions, and expansion of our membership, both within and outside the walls of our congregations. We also seek to defend our UU principles against those who seek to undermine them. We envision our congregations, denomination, and society as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating members of the world's rank and file by the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their cultural heritage, and as treasuring diversity in the context of the beloved community. We call this vision multiracial Unitarian Universalism. This is the prize we try to keep our eye on. This is what's on the top of the mountain that we're climbing. This is the goal, the unity of light and dark-skinned people of the world. Could we please be joined in a spirit of prayer or meditation? I want to read one of my favorite prayers. This is by Fred Cappuccino. Fred Cappuccino, he spells his name just like the beverage. I think he's still alive. He's a UU minister who spent most of his career in Canada and retired there. And if he is still alive, he's very old now. So he's not too well known by us in the US. He made a little splash in UU World Magazine a few years ago when they had a brief article about a remarkable fact of his personal life and the personal life of his wife, Bonnie. When he and his wife, Bonnie, married decades ago, they said that they would have 2 children of their own and then adopt 2. And they did have 2 children of their own. And then over the years, they adopted 19 for a total of 21 children that they raised to adulthood. This prayer is not specifically connected with that in any way. It's just a prayer I like very much. Could we please be joined in a spirit of prayer or meditation? The span of life passes, and the time of our years is all too brief. Let us therefore make room in our fellowship for those who have need of our love. Let us make room for the uprooted ones who have rejected their past but cannot find a future. Let us make room for the withdrawn who alone know their woes and have not yet found the courage to share them. Let us make room for the proud who think they know all the answers, and for those who have no answers at all. Let us make room for the sophisticates who think they know how to act, and for those who are too confused to act at all. Let us make room for the critical who disturb the status quo, and for the uncritical who accept it. Let us make room for each of us in our human condition. Let us deal gently with each other, and let us make room in our fellowship for each other. For the span of life passes, and the time of our years is all too brief. And now let us be silent together to create an opportunity for prayer or meditation. Please sing along. Please stay muted. If you sing loud, you can drown me out. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Kate, I think you have a reading.
I do. Am I not muted?
You're not muted.
Good. Okay.
We hear you.
Oh, good. So this is the story of Jesus healing at the pool of Bethesda. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem by the sheep market, a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folks, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? And the impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled, no friend to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus saith unto him, Rise, take up thy bed and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath.
Thank you. Let's listen to James P. Johnson again. You're on, Kate.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully the dog isn't going to start barking. She might, but. So one of my favorite writers growing up and still is a British naturalist named Gerald Durrell. And in the 1930s, when he was a young boy, his eccentric family, which included Gerald's elder brother, the novelist Lawrence Durrell, lived for 5 years on the Greek island of Corfu. Now, Corfu had and has its own patron saint, Saint Spiridon, who, at least in the days before the German occupation, but I think still, was maintained in mummified splendor in the inner sanctum of his namesake church. And once a year on the saint's festival day, the glass-fronted coffin would be taken out on parade through the streets of the town, and then it would be placed at the front of the church to receive visitors. Now, Saint Spiridon had a reputation for being able to cure diseases. So hundreds of the ailing faithful queued up, hobbling, sniffling, coughing, losing their taste and smell, for the chance to approach the saint and kiss his feet and ask for healing. Well, Gerald and his siblings had been forbidden by their mother to kiss the saint's feet. But Gerald's teenage sister, Margot, had acne. And in an excess of faith or adolescent desperation, she smooched Spiridon's mummified feet. And within days, just as her rational mom had predicted, Margot came down with a bad case of flu. It turned out the saint's feet were germy. Well, I tend to be, like Margot's mom, a skeptical rationalist when it comes to faith and health. And I'm also, sadly, a very concrete thinker. So when in the Gospel of John, Jesus mixes saliva and dirt in the palm of his hand and anoints the blind man's eye, I'm sitting there thinking there'd be a lot of bacteria mixed into that mud. And when he laid his hand on the centurion's child, how clean were his fingers? The hem of Jesus's garment, the one so eagerly seized by a woman in need of a cure, wouldn't it have been coated with germy schmutz, dragged up off the road? How often did Christ do his laundry? And did he use Clorox? Probably not. When in Luke chapter 11, a Pharisee invites Jesus to lunch, the Pharisee expresses surprise that Jesus neglected to wash his hands before eating. Oh, sure, Jesus responded scornfully to this criticism. You Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but inside you are full of robbery and wickedness. Morally pure he might have been, but even by the standards of his own day, Jesus was not known for his personal hygiene. Now, in these days of Corona, of masks and social distancing and those omnipresent Purell dispensers, is it just me who hears the story of Jesus's healing by the pool at Bethesda and imagines all those sick people lying around the water? Is it just me who wonders how many germs were just like leaching into that water? No wonder the angel sent to trouble the water was reputed to only dip in one toe. At a time when most illnesses were inexplicable mysteries, healing was also an inexplicable mystery, and indeed always a miracle. Touching the hem of the emperor's cloak, for example, was said to miraculously cure disease. According to the Catholic scholar John Dominic Crossan, the really unbelievable thing about Jesus's healings wasn't that a cure could be obtained by faith. There was no other way. But rather that it was this ordinary and rather grubby guy, Jesus, who could make it happen. Now, if he had lived at the time of Jesus, my husband Seem would have been like the man by the pool at Bethesda, impotent, meaning disabled. He had arthritis in both hip joints. And back in the 1st century, he would have been reduced to lying around in helpless pain, hoping for an angel to bring a miracle. But we don't live in the 1st century, we live in the 21st century. And an orthopedic surgeon asked Seem, "Wilt thou be made whole?" "Yeah," said he. Speak of the devil. "Hey, Seem, I'm not done, honey." There he is. Where was I?
Speak
"Wilt
of the-
thou be made whole?" It's okay. "Wilt thou be made whole?" the surgeon said. And Seem said, "Yeah." And so for 40 grand a pop, the surgeon cheerfully, almost casually dismantled my beloved, replaced the defective original parts with brand new titanium and high-tech plastic. And within hours, the physical therapist had arrived in my husband's hospital room to say, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." Since the surgery involved the use of what amount to carpentry tools, hacksaws and drills, and since gore and money are involved, a modern hip replacement doesn't sound like a Bible-style miracle. But on the other hand, my husband is not only back hard at work as a potter, and by the way, Saint Spiridon is the patron saint of potters. Didn't know that before. But my husband's also back to snowboarding and ice hockey. And for all I know, the orthopedic surgeon was full of robbery and wickedness on the inside, but he scrubbed the outside of himself before laying a single skilled finger on my beloved and Seem uninfected, healed, and was made whole, which is miracle enough for me. The surgeon who replaced my husband's hips didn't claim to be God. He was just a nice, brisk, expensive, and competent human being who specializes in wonky hips. We might think of Jesus as more of a general practitioner, but there were problems Jesus never addressed. There were ailments he couldn't, or at least didn't, cure. For instance, Jesus did not open the wombs of the barren. This is actually remarkable because Jesus's tradition and even his own family contained many stories of women who prayed for and received miraculous relief from infertility. Sarah, Hannah, Rebecca, the wife of Abimelech, Rachel, Manoah's wife, the Shunammite woman, and John the Baptist's mom, Jesus's Aunt Elizabeth. These all yearned and prayed for babies and by a miracle received them. But maybe Jesus, being a bit of an apocalyptic, who didn't expect the world to last as long, even as the lives of his disciples, figured there wasn't much point in bringing more people into it, however keenly the childless might suffer. And there were other limitations on the healings of Jesus. He didn't heal criminals of their criminality or oppressors of their oppressiveness. He liberated no prisoners, freed no slaves, and there were a lot of slaves around. Well, and then there's this. Jesus's miracles weren't permanent. They're all undone by now. The limbs of the lame are dust. The eyes of the blind no longer see. Lazarus was raised only to die again. And the surface of the Sea of Galilee bears no footprints. This will one day be true of the orthopedic surgeon's miracle too, and any and all of the miracles offered by Saint Spiridon to sick Greeks and zitty British teenagers. Death is the cure for all diseases, and time the undoing of all our miracles. But death isn't the only limitation that even Jesus's miracle healings ran up against. Take the man lying for 38 years beside the pool at Bethesda. Wilt thou be made whole? Jesus asks. And here's how the man answers. I have no servant, no friend to ensure that I get my turn in the healing waters. So Jesus cures him. Whatever disease or disorder had taken the power to walk from him, poof, it was gone. Here's what Jesus could not do, or at least what Jesus did not do. He did not give the man back those 38 years. The man who stood up on his own legs for the first time in nearly 4 decades must be imagined as a man who never had the chance to work, to marry, to have a wife and kids, or even to make the sort of friends who might have stayed by the pool with him, ready to tip him into it as soon as that angel's troubling toe kicked up some ripples. Jesus could remove the largest obstacle that lay between his patient and a better future, but he could not give that man a better past. And we can't do this either. Your history, my history, the history of 2020 and 2021 so far, and please God, not 2022. Human history only runs in one direction. We can improve what lies ahead, but the past, the good, the bad, the horrible, the just, the unjust, and the incomprehensible, everything that brought us to where we are, it is what it is. We can't undo what has already been done, no matter how much faith we bring to the project. There is one impediment to healing that human beings can, by faith, step over. It is our own unwillingness to heal. Wilt thou be made whole? Jesus asks. That's an odd question. Why would anyone answer no? Well, it is possible to grow comfortable within one's limitations. When that guy was lying by the pool waiting for the angels, no one could make demands on him. Deprived of power, he had also been freed of responsibility. And power and responsibility always go together. Once healed, he could do anything, which would mean that he had to do something. Wilt thou be made whole? Notice the man never actually answers yes. I've had a few folks confess to me that they actually miss the COVID lockdown. They've gotten used to the excuse for not leaving the house, not visiting relatives, not going to work, not having to get dressed, not having to try. When we stand, struggle, protest, march, work, chant, speak out, sing out for a cause, for a change in the world, a really good change, how paradoxical that we can experience bewilderment when at last we actually get yes for an answer. So it wouldn't surprise me if the guy Jesus healed, the guy from Bethesda, actually spent his first year or two of healthy life still hanging around beside that pool. Where else could he go? What else could he do? At least there by the pool, he could do something. He could tend to the lame and the halt, those who had not yet received their miracle. He could bring them meals and massage their limbs and maybe soften the edges of their suffering. Maybe there he could learn the skills, as Mother Teresa would say, of doing small things with great love. And eventually, maybe he'd take that show on the road. In the meantime, made whole and making whole, I imagine him standing with the suffering, keeping them company, while they awaited their own moment in that blessed season when the angel would at last arrive to make the water holy with her one clean, fastidious toe. Amen.
Amen. We hope you will look us over. Go to our website. There are many issues of our several times a year magazine, the Mac Arrow, the Arrow, on that website with lots of, I think, important articles. Think about giving us money. Think about joining us. Think about joining us. We exist to fight racism, but we are concerned that national UU officials at the UUA and in the seminaries and in the UU Ministers Association, not all national officials, but a controlling majority of them are pursuing an anti-racist path that we feel is not productive. We feel, in fact, will tend to make racism worse. It's a path whose slogan is dismantle our white supremacy culture, and that could be considered insulting to white people, but that's not our concern. Our concern is that whole approach seems to be, in a subtle way, but a profound way, racist in an anti-Black way. It doesn't view Black people and other people of color as warriors or survivors, but rather as victims who can't possibly succeed without a hand up from somebody who's white. And we feel it's an infantilization of Black people. We feel this is not the way to go. And unfortunately, these national officials don't want to talk about it. There's now an authoritarianism in that the people in the pews, for the most part, haven't experienced yet, but it does exist at the national level. And this authoritarianism just flies in the face of the most basic UU value, which is free thought, free expression, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the right of conscience and the democratic process, et cetera, et cetera. This is why we exist, and we hope you'll consider perhaps joining us, or at least looking us over. Kate, you have a benediction, I think.
I do. I wrote somewhere that one of the very nice things about the English language is that the word God and the word love both have one syllable, so you can swap them out for each other. It's really fun to do with Beatles songs. But this benediction is born of that technique. So join me in prayer or meditation. O love that is in heaven, hallowed be the name of love. Love's kingdom come, love's will be done on earth as it must be in any heaven worthy of the name. Give us this day our daily bread, Forgive us our trespasses as we in love forgive those who have trespassed against us. Love be a shield from all temptation. Love deliver us from evil. For in love belongs the kingdom, the power, and the glory, always and always. Amen.
After the postlude, I invite you to stay for just an open conversation. We don't have coffee hour, but we have an open conversation that goes on for a while. Feel free to leave, of course, at any time. You're not hurt at anyone's feelings, but we'll talk to one another as long as people are interested in staying. I would ask you to, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button called Reactions. And if the lower part of the menu you get says raise hand, and above that there's some emoticons, but it's the raise hand thing I'm interested in. If you press that raise hand thing, you get a little hand up in the or in the window. But not only that, the Zoom technology puts your picture at the front so we can know who raised their hand first. Now, I don't know though if Nancy, Allen, or Ellen was first. Who was first? Was it you, Nancy? Let's
Let
assume,
Nancy go first. I think it was either she and I were in a tie. Let Nancy go first.
Okay.
Well, I just got this book from the library just half an hour ago. They deliver, well, actually, my partner delivered, but by Charles Murray, Human Diversity and the Biology of Gender, Race, and Class. And I'm just curious, it's a big book. Does anyone know anything about it?
Murray, one of our enemies.
What's that?
Not sure.
That,
Yeah.
I hope it's not the same Charles Murray that did the bell curve. I'm just.
He wrote Coming Apart. And
Yeah, that's him. That's him.
okay.
It's a tricky book.
Huh?
Brother Murray is part of the. I don't want to get too involved in these conversations, so I just simply say, take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah, that's the boy. That's the boy. He was part of the bell curve, which put
Okay.
out some pretty bad stuff about the average Black person being not quite capable of full participation in a desegregated society.
I'm having a really hard time these days sorting out who is good to read and who isn't, and I only have so much time. But there's an awful lot of untruths out there, and I'm having a hard time sorting it out.
I think Murray is controversial, but he does have some truths. The question is how you interpret those things.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's you have to understand there's a context. Yeah.
Even the devil can speak truth, as my father taught me. Who's next?
I think it's me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to say thank you, Reverend Kate, for your sermon. I'm one who, believes that we're blessed with the creative spirit. And one of the things that we're able to do with that creative spirit is to devise cures, particularly in recent times, we've been getting better and better at that. And so, that's whether that's from an original creative force or whatever one believes, but having that capacity and using it for a better community, a beloved community is one that uses to help heal. So that's certainly, one of the things that we have and we should put to good use, and at least some people do. So I also just wanted to side mention, somebody from Minnesota asked in a little, put in a little chat, asked whether there was any people of color active with UU and UAC. So I just want them to know that our founder, Reverend Campbell, who's among us here, is a person of color, as is another member of our board. So with that, I'll shut up.
Mhm. And please lower your hand again, Alan.
Okay.
Ellen, please unmute yourself. Ellen, what happened to Ellen?
Okay,
That's
I
it.
think I got all the technology
Here we
squared
go.
away here.
We go.
Oh, I really appreciated the service, the music, and the rambling sermon, which ultimately got to a really interesting point. And I just would say that it's very strange to me how, even though I basically rejected the Christianity that I grew up with, the Bible stories and images just like pierce through the armor, and I can't help but be affected by them. And then this, in the sermon, of course, they were sort of, I guess you would say, like a potter, they were massaged to come up to steer us in a direction of thinking that was quite interesting. And so I will have something to chew on for a while. And the other point I would like to say is that I have heard from a reliable source that the patron saint of potters is actually Saint Vitus. So, which I thought was very convenient for potters. So
Mhm.
that's it. That's all I got to say at
Thank
this
you.
point.
Thank you. Patricia.
Yeah, I was interested in what you said about the conflict between the UUA administration's strategy and the UMAC strategy for dealing with racism and diversity. I know here in Brainerd, we've had quite a bit of pushback at the school board against the thought, it's just a thought, it's not even reality, that the schools might be teaching white kids to be ashamed of themselves and dismantling white supremacy in the elementary schools. So I'm interested in learning more about your strategy, and that's one reason I asked if there were people of color involved, because I wanted to be sure that it's not just an idea that older white people had.
Our strategy is pretty much the Martin Luther King playbook, which is the only thing we've ever seen work in our lifetimes. But Finley might have something to say about this. Go ahead, Finley.
Yes, I'd like to do a mix, and I apologize, I may have to leave before this wonderful process. First of all, Sister Kate, to be honest with you, I was sort of skeptical because of the discussions we've been having. You all been having on other things, but God, that was gorgeous. That was a wonderful, to use the old-fashioned word, exegesis on that simple narrative and some really important points. What do you do after you're cured? That's a good one. What do you now what do we do? 30, 40 years hanging around this pool. I don't know where I want to go. I like the community here, so appreciate that. UBIAC is designed to get people whole. I want to use that metaphor. We are broken on the issue of race. Black people, I got these Afrocentric neo-racist friends. They're so obsessed with the inherent evil of white people in order to justify stepping aside. And I've used to know some white folks down in Indiana who, when I was running for office, threatened to beat me up just because of the color of my skin. We are broken. We are impotent. I like that word. We're impotent in order to make real change because of racism, and worst of all, the wrong analysis of where the racism came from and what it is. And let me begin, and I don't want to take too much time. If UBIAC was all white, but had these ideas, it would still be absolutely useful. I always argue about the 300 guys from Maine fighting at the Battle of Gettysburg. Never met a personal Black person anywhere. All of them were technically white at a time when the Confederates were arguing no white man would kill other white men to set the colors free. These guys, 300, ran out of ammunition at Gettysburg and fixed bayonets, went down that hill and turned the battle because they could not swing behind it. Fortunately, we have several key Black leaders in our organization, but I always like to make that clear. UBIAC was actually formed to reach out to white congregations because there was so much talk about, well, you're an all white congregation, there's nothing you can do. I've attended meetings at the Pool of Siloam. I'll use that metaphor because Kate put it out there. All these broken, wounded people here. And then these Black Pharisee types will say, well, you can't do anything about these broken bodies here because you don't have any Black people in your church. So you got to wait until you get some Black people in your church, and then you can go out and do some curing. So that's why we came on board with this vision of the content of your character, the content of your belief. Commitment to multiracial unity is determined primarily as the abolitionists in Maine. They never saw a Black person personally, but they hated slavery from what they heard about it, the impact upon their own economies, etc. So to make a long story short, UMAC is committed to answer that question. What do you want to do to be whole? Do you want to be whole with all this racism out here, this shattering of our humanity? Every white UU must ask that question. Do you want to be whole? And you cannot be whole by buying into this white supremacyology stuff. All these Black people, Black folks in the UUA leadership, do you want to be whole? You cannot be whole separating yourself with harbors and havens from your white brothers and sisters. So UBIAC is into whole making. We don't have the power of Jesus, certainly, but we do believe in the healing power of people committing themselves to our ideology and theology called multiracial Unitarian Universalism. And in 2022, in October, we're going to go to Geneva, Switzerland, and reaffirm our commitment to this process. So I just love what happened tonight. Beautiful. And that's my talking too much response to your question.
Alana
Thank you.
and John, I passed right over you because I wanted to give Finley a chance to respond to Patricia, but it's your turn now.
Thank you, Finley. That was really good. And as Monty Python used to say, now for something completely different. The sermon, and I thank you very much, Reverend Kate. It made me think of a joke. What's the difference between God and a doctor? God knows she's not a doctor. Thank you.
Amen to that.
Jack.
Well, hi, Kate. I want to compliment you on a lovely, lovely sermon. Just wonderful. Thank you. And I'm so glad that you gave us a translated version of the Lord's Prayer. You know, what I wanted to contribute was just this. Do you all know that the Lord's Prayer is the most important prayer in either testament, in either scripture? Why? Because it's the only place that we learn the name of God. You know, it begins, our Father who art in heaven, hello, hallowed be thy name. So,
Oh boy. Oh my God.
it's the prayer that teaches us, you know, so, yeah, the name of God. You know, I want to say, I've been following some of the debates on Facebook about the gadflies and the whole conflict between the people who are in favor of the eighth principle and changing the way we do things, and people who are somewhat dubious. And I urge you all to get involved and take an interest because, you know, in the next 2 years, we're going to have an attempt by this Commission on Institutional Change to radically restructure our purposes and principles and make the denomination something that it's never been and will not likely succeed in being. So personally, I'm very worried about that, and I urge your attention to it. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Dick Burkhardt.
Yeah, here I am. I was thinking more about that sermon, the man who's healed. They ask, what will make you whole? Would you be whole? And it occurred to me that that's really what happened in the civil rights movement. Back in the 60s, there was an opportunity for the society to heal itself by becoming more whole. And that required, as you pointed out in the sermon, learning how to become more whole, learning what is possible. When you're freed to do more things, you have more power. As you said, there's more responsibility, but what you do. And we've been learning what to do since then. And I think the key is not to blame others, but to learn what to do on all sides, because it's actually empowering to all sides.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Go ahead.
Yes. Cindy.
Yes, I appreciated the service. I thought it very well crafted. I enjoyed it. but my comment was really on something slightly different. I occasionally listen in on a group at the Unitarian Universalist affiliated group called First Existentialist, and they have a lot of guest speakers. And their guest speaker was one of the newer ministers of some church in the Northeast, and I've forgotten the name of it. I think her name was Reverend Johnson. But she built her service around the first principle and the seventh principle, she said. And she was trying to weave those together. And I asked after the service of her, you know, in her weaving those two principles, she had absolutely no acknowledgement in her comment of the interdependent web of existence having anything to do with the natural earth or the creatures we share the earth with, et cetera, et cetera. It was all, she left that completely out. And when I asked her about it, she kind of rejected my question by suggesting, oh, well, all the other principles to some extent address nature, which I hadn't really thought about it, but I went back and looked at them, and I have to say, no, they don't. But anyway, I was just really kind of, is somebody trying to speak
No.
up? I hear the sound. But anyway, so I was really, I'm a long time UU, but I have kind of stepped away from it a little bit in recent years. And it was just another sign to me that there is something that has really changed, that is for me personally not in a positive direction with what the UU, that their minister would not even want to acknowledge the notion that one of our principles, at least, it would be nice for it to reflect our connection to the earth. So anyway, wanted to share that with everybody. And I guess I did kind of want to ask, since Mr. Campbell's still here, I recently did an audio book that was, it's a summary of some of Thomas Sowell's writings and a little bit about him, historically about him, etc. And I appreciated lots of it, but I guess I was just curious if Mr. Campbell has any comments about, I'm sure it's a mixed bag, but about Thomas Sowell.
Well, he and I debated back when all of this genetics and the IQ stuff popped up back in the 70s down at Wabash College in Crawfordsville, Indiana. And we just we were coming out of different frameworks. But he did give an insight to me in our debate. He argued he was glad that Jensen, he's a Jensenist, IQ is genetic. And he said black people shouldn't have to worry about this issue because the real black people have high IQs. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I have an high IQ. Therefore, he's not saying that all black people are inferior. He's just saying those with low IQs. And then he said, and there's some whites who have these low IQs. I said, well, brother, what's happening is nobody's going to go to that far as you're doing. All they're going to hear about is black folks have low IQs. And he said, well, my job is to make it clear that there is a section of the black population which was called the talented 10th. These were those that were set aside according to a brother named Du Bois to go to college, to get higher education. And so he gave me the insight that the new racism would no longer be based on racial dimension. There'll be a class race segment. And then this was reinforced by my training as a Marxist-Leninist, that what was happening in the new racism, they have exempted, in the case of Thomas Sowell in his debate with me, I have an IQ, therefore these are attacks on the people with low IQs do not affect me at all. And in fact, he said, I agree with Jensen. There is a genetic component to IQ, and thank God I got that genetic component. So to me, that was one of the central components of neo-racism. The new racism no longer based purely on color or racial origin, but now we have criteria like genetics, culture, family life, etc. So I reject him ideologically, but I appreciated the insight that caused me to develop this theory of neo-racism.
Thank you. I assume that the book, you know, is just taking selective comment or quotes from him, et cetera, and probably was doing a good job of, you know, framing the picture they wanted to frame. So I appreciate the additional background. Thank you.
Jack.
Yeah, thanks. A word about Charles Murray. You know, he got in a lot of trouble over the book, The Bell Curve. He's a committed libertarian. And so I take everything he says with a grain of salt, maybe a ton of salt. But just because someone makes a mistake or two at one point in their career doesn't mean that everything they do is worthless. And he wrote what I consider to be one of the most important books of our time about 10 or 15 years ago in Coming Apart, which is a study of, Murray is a master statistician. And Coming Apart is a study of basically the life orientation and life success of two demographic groups, what you might call the upper middle class among whites. And he limited his study to whites to avoid, what would you call it? Conflicting influences. And the other demographic group he called Fishtown, that is working class whites. And he points out that all of the social institutions that we rely on in our communities to provide us with the glue that holds communities together, things like the PTA and the Rotary and the Lions and the VFW and the American Legion and so forth, that all of these things have decreased in importance or even disappeared from working class communities. And all the statistics about divorce and crime and so on have risen precipitously. And he said, if this is allowed, if as a society we allow this to continue, we're not going to have a nation. We're going to have two different nations. We're going to have the upper middle class, and we're going to have the lower working class, and they're not going to be able to talk to or understand one another. And since he published his book, what have we had? We've had George Bush, and we've had Donald Trump. And so I think the man is right on target that the glue that holds our social institutions together in this country is coming apart. And I don't know if we can be rescued.
Thank you.
It's well worth a look. Coming apart.
Kate, you're muted.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say more or less what Jack just said, that I think Coming Apart was and you know, that Murray is a serious guy. Thomas Sowell is a serious guy. They're both worth reading. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with them, just that you know, those are not lightweights and they're not ideologues. But I think, to take what Jack said further, I think he was spot on in Fishtown, and I can't remember the other one, Belltown or Belleville or something. Describing the two Americas kind of. And somebody said to me once that Trump was, I keep saying in our discussion online that Trump was an effect, not a cause. And that's what he's an effect of, I think. And that, and then somebody said to me at some point, Trump was the last chance, not for the not for the lower middle class, whatever. Trump was really the last chance for the elites. He was the big giant signal to the elites, and they didn't take it. And I thought that was interesting. So I just think as a phenomenon, I think he's interesting, which I know everybody's going to get mad at me for saying that. so I take it back. I take it back. But
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you
no, I don't. No, I don't.
There you go.
I think he's interesting.
Stand firm.
Yeah, I'll stand firm. Yeah,
Stand
I
firm.
do.
Don't-
I think he's interesting, and I think we need to pay attention, not to him, but to what, given the options available, what was trying to be transmitted, what were we trying to do, and what was supposed to be, communicated with that. I have to go.
Okay,
My friends, but thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. And it's been, I mean, I can't even tell you how wonderful it's been to have these long, well, mostly they're long because of me, I know that. But to be involved in that and engaged with all of you has been really, really wonderful. Really wonderful. I mean, really healing.
Yep, right on, right on.
thank you.
If you
so
were
much.
here, I would give you all a hug, but.
We'll give you a psychic hug.
Yeah, we'll give you like a virtual
Yeah.
hug. So,
There
yeah.
you go.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I never.
Yeah, well, before I'm getting ready to leave myself, I'd like to leave a couple of remarks. First of all, this is a wonderful program. When we first started, I didn't know what would happen. But I said, Richard, make it work. When 2 or 3 are gathered together, you'll have energy. And from what I'm seeing and hearing, my first time attending, this is great. Let me make just 3 quick comments. Number one, the healing process. I used to be I am a faith healer type person. I have a gift, which I call psi, rooted in some other kinds of theology, called what I call quantum metaphysics. But I decided not to do that anymore, because what it did was you make you the center of the process rather than the political change that was needed to have healthcare for all. We appreciate Jesus with his one-on-one curing technique, but fortunately for us, he said, greater things than this you should do. And so buried in all of the curing, healing narratives is healthcare for all. I just want to throw that out there. Healthcare for all. Everybody can be a Jesus. And it's easier to do if you pay doctors and nurses a living human wage and have one Medicare for all. Number 2, there's some guy did a study of all the diseases that Jesus dealt with. He said some of it was clearly like leprosy and things of that nature, physical in nature. But he argued some of it may have been psychosomatic, particularly the ones with the demonic possession stuff. And that what Jesus was able to do was, in my little chat, I put in the placebo effect, if we treat him as a real person. And that was a part of that power. Science fiction guys argue he was a star child and he was using psychokinetic energy to do all that cure. So there's always all these narratives that grow out of the curing power of Jesus. So it's a wonderful way to understand that what made Jesus unique as a Messiah figure, because a lot of them running around at that time, was his taking time from his messianic duty to stop along the way and either cure somebody directly by putting spit and clay on their eyes, or being touched by the hem of his robe by the woman with the issue of blood. It's a powerful metaphor, an energy of this figure. Some say it was totally created. Others say, well, maybe there was a Jesus, but the stories about him would make him real. And finally, with the correction with my dear friend Kate, he actually did rescue a prisoner. When he was on the cross, in fact, in Catholic theology, he's called Ditmas. He was the good thief, the one that said, Jesus, you should be up here with us. You are a good guy. We deserve it. And Jesus said, this day shalt thou be with me in paradise. And as my father would say, and snatched him off the cross and took him to heaven with him. So I had to make that small correction. He did do some prison reform stuff. Comrades in the struggle, I'm out of here. Appreciate what we did, and let's keep doing it. Take care, everybody. Join URIAC. We're on a roll.
Mhm. Mhm. Anybody, or are we out of gas?
I think we're at an end point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming.
Do you, Richard, do you know the sermon title yet for next month?
Is Ken still here? No. It's something like, wait a minute, just a second. I might even have it. Yes. Ken Pfeiffer's sermon is called My Sermon, If I Had Only One Sermon to Preach.
Okay.
If I had only one sermon to preach.
Okay. 'Cause it would have been nice when you put up the coming sermon, if you had a title to put it up there too. So,
Well, I thought of that, but I didn't want to distract from Kate's sermon.
okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you and good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Oh, Dick, did you want to say something, or is your hand just still up by
Oh,
accident?
yeah,
Go ahead.
maybe on this Charles Murray thing. I haven't read Murray himself, but I have read a book on IQ that talked a lot about Murray's studies. And these scientific studies concluded that what they call the G factor or IQ is a very well studied thing. And when they studied that in the US, they found out that the group with the highest level of this general intelligence or G factor was Eastern Europeans, basically Jews. And then came the Asians, and then came the whites, and then the Hispanics, and the blacks were on the bottom. And if you think about that, and these were very solid statistics too. But are there really genetic? And they couldn't find out. They couldn't identify environmental differences. But it seems obvious that there are strong environmental differences. Probably just the whole culture. Like the East Asian people who've come here in recent decades, they work like for Microsoft and places like that. They're very well educated. But around where I live, we also have some people who are refugees from Vietnam, and they don't have the same kind of high IQ. I think if you look at the whole cultures, you can find the Jewish culture is very intellectual now. If you find a whole culture, and the whole culture raises IQ, because IQ sort of measures a cultural capacity, and once you realize that, these cultural things could turn around. We could, in a century or two, it could be the Black culture is on top.
Yeah.
So that's just something I've learned.
People were talking about Thomas Sowell, and he was condemned when the bell curve came out because he didn't denounce it. But what he did is write a review of it, saying that it was full of statistical flaws, that he didn't know if blacks had less intelligence than other people or not, but that this book certainly hadn't proven it, that it was full of logical error.
I was the one that pointed out something that was reviewing. It was a summary of different essays or writings, books of Thomas Sowell.
Yes.
And basically the way they put it across was that Thomas Sowell was not claiming or accepting the notion that blacks had a lower IQ. He may have been putting some credence to the notion that when a group is when they're he compared it to other people from other countries when they first came over to this country and what their IQs were at that point versus how it shifted as they rose in the society. And so I think he was just more saying, seemed to me he was not saying that blacks had lower IQ, but that it might be correct that under the circumstances that their IQ may appear to be lower based on their circumstances at that time or something.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
I wanted to say that I think IQ testing is culturally influenced and culturally biased in itself. So I don't think you can really, say it's totally objective, because just the test, the development of the testing is culturally biased.
Mhm.
In any case.
Yes. Whoops. Yes. Karen.
Hey, I just wanted to say, I mean, I'm a psychologist. IQ testing is not really, intelligence testing isn't really intelligence. It's really a predictor of academic performance. That's what it is. But we have it all up in our head that it's some magical thing called overall intelligence. It is not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole confusion right there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, if we look at the, excuse me, at the performance of African American people in the American culture, it's obvious that that this is a subgroup of people who are highly adaptive and highly intelligent.